Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled Why Speed Matters, Preparing for Google's SEO Update. My name is Ernesto Maldonado, and I'm the Solutions Engineering Team Lead here at 101 Domain. And joining me today will be Yev.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yevgeny Churinov, and I go by Yev. I'm a Solutions Engineer with 101 Domain.
How's your week going, Yev?
It's going great. The weather's really warming up. I've had my coffee, and I'm really excited to talk about today's webinar.
Well, I'm already on cup 2 this morning.
Oh, nice.
You're right that this webinar is really exciting, and it could be a good opportunity for many of the people joining us today. We're also happy to have a special guest joining us. He's probably the reason why you clicked the link to our webinar. True, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ernesto. Yeah, hey guys, I'm True Tamplin. I'm the CEO of Up Digital, and we're a digital marketing agency based here in Los Angeles with an emphasis on search engine optimization. Thanks so much for having me on the webinar.
Thanks for joining us today, True. It's great to have someone who has direct experience with SEO here. I'm sure your insight is going to be really valuable as we dig deep into what this change means. Here is a quick summary of what we will be discussing today. The shift towards user experience. How does Google score your website? Google's core web vitals. Why Secure Web Accelerator is an easy win. Achieving core web vitals best practices with Secure Web Accelerator. And what to do next.
By the end of this webinar, we hope that everyone will have a better understanding of Core Web Vitals and the direct connection between Core Web Vitals and site performance. We also hope everyone gains insight on achieving Core Web Vitals best practices with a few simple steps. SEO
has come a really long way since the expansion of the internet. Originally, SEO was not much more than submitting a sitemap to a search engine, but that grew with the content available on the internet. Websites have also become increasingly complex, and SEO practices have needed to adapt.
Look at that. That is a screenshot of the old 101 Domain website way back when SEO was the wild, wild west. SEO really has come a long way. From a high-level overview, SEO can be viewed sort of like a Venn diagram with tactics to rank in Google on one side and user experience on the other side. Back in the day, like when this screenshot you're seeing here was taken, there was very little overlap between what it took to rank in Google and what made for a good user experience. But over time, those two circles have overlapped more and more. And Google's eventual goal is to get those two circles, user experience and the things to do to rank better in Google, to have those two circles to have a perfect overlap.
True. What are some of the changes that you've seen happen to SEO practices over the last few years?
Well, gone are the days where you could buy a bunch of backlinks from private blog networks to push your page to the top of Google. Now SEO best practices are more about making a website that simply does a better job of answering users' queries. Google has continually made updates to make its algorithm, give preferential treatment to sites with a better user experience, and that's going to continue. And this big Core Web Vitals update is just one of those core updates that gives a boost to sites, with fast load times or better page experience overall, and punishes those sites with a poor page experience. So let's take a look at a timeline of these core updates that gave preference to sites which had a better user experience. If you're familiar with SEO updates at all, you've probably heard of those big core updates to Google's algorithm that were named after animals, like the panda update, then penguin, then hummingbird. There have also been a few big ones that were rolled out to do a better job of understanding language in context, like in full paragraphs. These were ones known as like BERT, or some that focus on the expertise, authority, and trust of a website. It's called EAT, expertise, authority, and trust, especially for those sensitive industries that affect your money or your life, like health and finance. But throughout Google's algorithm update history, they've been periodically releasing updates relating to the user experience of a website. If you were to see all of the core updates that Google has made to its algorithm, it would be overwhelming. But here are some of the biggest ones that relate directly to page experience. So in 2010, Google decided to incorporate desktop website performance as a variable in its algorithm. And in 2015, there was an update meant to reward mobile-friendly websites with better search rankings and provide better results to searchers on mobile devices. You've probably seen sites on mobile that don't shrink down to a mobile-friendly view, but rather try to fit the entire desktop view onto the screen, and it just makes a terrible, mobile device experience. Again, this is a page experience update, not necessarily a page speed update like the Core Web Vitals update. Page speed is under the umbrella of page experience overall, which most devices these days are actually mobile rather than desktop. And in 2016, there was a 2.0 version of this mobile update, which, according to Google, quote, increases the effect of the ranking signal. That just means that Google placed even more weight on this signal, which benefited mobile-friendly sites even more, and vice versa for non-mobile friendly sites. And in 2018, mobile first indexing was introduced, which means that Google ranks a page based on how it is on mobile first, and then gives secondary priority to how it is on desktop. Before this update, Google was ranking sites based on how they were on desktop first, with mobile second. And finally, this year, Google's officially incorporating Core Web Vitals as a part of its overall algorithm, and that's what this presentation is on. Later on, we'll do a breakdown of what Core Web Vitals is comprised of to get a better understanding of it.
Thanks for the great timeline, True. What you're saying is that your website's performance, specifically mobile, makes you rank higher or lower on Google. The better your website performs in speed, the better your site will rank and get more visibility. It sounds like this is something that all business owners need to pay attention to. There's an opportunity here to make some gains in SEO rankings. It also sounds like an announcement like this from Google is rare and can be very impactful. Why don't we talk a little about website speed and performance? Yev, why don't you take it away?
So what is speed? When people think of website speed, they usually think websites would load faster based on Wi-Fi or network connection speed, such as having either a slow DSL line or having gigabit fiber, device speed, such as using an older netbook versus using a new desktop, and when discussing mobile performance, the location or cell phone signal strength. When it comes to measuring website performance, the truth is that these and other factors all contribute in one way or another. When discussing mobile performance, the factors that can influence performance are so wide because cell phones can come from any manufacturer, be on any network, and request a site from anywhere. Mobile devices come in many technical specs. Take an iPhone X compared to a Galaxy S3. Both have different memory, processors, screen sizes, operating systems, and network capability, such as 3G versus 5G. Essentially, we have a problem quantifying performance. In Google's eyes, website speed really is about how well your website platform performs. Loading performance, like how fast does content appear on the screen. Responsiveness, like how fast does the page respond to user input. And visual stability, such as does the content move around on the screen while it's loading. Perceived user experience will drop if your website has an issue with any of these three metrics.
Yeah, so this is the Page Speed Insights tool. This is actually a free tool made by Google. You can actually go to it right now and take a look at your own website speed just by Googling Page Speed Insights tool and click on the first link in Google, or you can visit the URL shown on this slide. So let's take a look at an example within the PageSpeed Insights tool. For this, we'll use 101domain.ru since it hasn't yet benefited from any of the suggestions we put in here, and it's still actually failing the Core Web Vitals assessment, which is probably going to be your case as well, and it shows different data. But there's a few components to this report that I'd like to point out. The first is this tab up here at the top left here. Google gives you a report for mobile page speeds and a separate tab for desktop page speeds. Come back here to mobile. So right here up at the top, Google gives you a pass or not pass, a pass or fail, whether or not your site has met Google's Core Web Vitals assessment. The Core Web Vitals assessment is what's being incorporated in Google's algorithm beginning in May of 2021. But Google's announced they'll be releasing periodic releases over the next few months. Now, it's important to note that while the Core Web Vitals assessment is pass or fail, a user's page experience is more of a sliding scale, and you can constantly be improving the user's page experience. Load times is just one component of that page experience. So the most prominent feature, the score right here, this is a score between 1 and 100, with 100 being the best, and it gives you even a breakdown of good versus okay versus poor, and the colors coordinate with the Disney movie Inside Out, where you should be flaming red angry guy at your developers if your score is in the red, like this one right here. So anyways, no, in all seriousness, for the breakdown of the different components of the page speed, something I want to point out is this report gives you a field data section, and it also gives you a lab data section. Now, field data right up here, this is real user data collected over the last 28 days. So it says over the last 28-day collection period right here. So this is, again, it's actually the field data is what the Core Web Vitals assessment is based on. It's based on the real data collected over the last 28-day period, and that is what will pass or fail your website from a Core Web Vitals perspective. Now down here, this lab data is still important. So when you make a change to your website, the metrics of how fast it loads should be reflected immediately in the lab data, which is sort of the simulated data of Google. When we were loading this report, Google was actually crawling your site to test how fast it was. The lab data should update immediately when you make changes to your site. And the lab data can sort of be thought of where your field data is going to be in 28 days. So again, if you make a change to your site, it'll be reflected immediately in the lab data section down here. But you won't see a change in your field data until Google has collected new data, with the site in its new state. Okay, so there are only 3 of these 4, a little confusing, but only 3 of these 4 components are actually incorporated in the Core Web Vitals assessment. First contentful paint is not one of them. This is actually a means to an end of calculating the largest contentful paint. So the only 3 components that are part of the Core Web Vitals assessment is your largest contentful paint right here, your first input delay, or FID, and then your cumulative layout shift. And so FID, CLS, and LCP, this is SEO is already an acronym-heavy industry to begin with. Now you've got 3 more to add to your flashcards. So let's take a look, though, at these 3 components individually: largest contentful paint, or LCP, first input delay, or FID, and then cumulative layout shift. Let's take a look at these individually.
Thanks for that summary, True. Let's demystify the Core Web Vitals and look at each one closely. We'll start with largest contentful paint. The largest contentful paint time, known as LCP, is a measure of when the largest element on your website finishes rendering. With the largest element fully loaded, a website should be providing useful content to the user. Thus, improving the LCP will mean a better user experience. The largest element can be anything: text, images, and even video players can all be the largest element. The key concept in LCP is that the largest element occupies the most space in the viewport. This means that there will be less blank space on the user's device while the site finishes loading other content.
The first input delay, or FID, measures the time it takes to process a user's input once the page has content rendered. If you have ever visited a website with performance issues and clicked on an element of the page without anything happening for a while, like a feeling of lag, then you have experienced high first input delay. Google's Core Web Vitals recommends that this value be under 100 milliseconds. On desktops, an FID time of less than 100 milliseconds is easy to achieve, but on mobile devices that have less memory and slower processors, hitting that 100 millisecond mark is more complex and requires developers to optimize JavaScript.
Cumulative layout shift, or CLS, measures how many elements move on a web page after they have been rendered. For those of you with many WordPress plugins, you may notice that sometimes your larger elements, like banners and carousels, will load after the rest of your page, causing all other rendered elements to move downward or shift. This is considered undesirable behavior for a lot of reasons. As you can see in our example, the user does not intend to click the Place My Order button, but the layout shifts cause the Place My Order button to shift after additional content renders in the header. Our goal as digital asset owners and managers is to ensure that the properties which we oversee meet best practices defined by Web Core Vitals. We'll talk more about how we can accomplish this easily later in the webinar.
Everyone wants what they want now. No delays. Individuals require immediacy. That is why slower websites miss out on revenue. Customers are more likely to abandon a slow and laggy customer experience. It really is that simple. Another consequence of poor website performance could be that your website doesn't even render. This happens quite a bit with lower-end devices. That is money that you are throwing away. If you are interested in learning more about the cost of poor performance, you could visit thinkwithgoogle.com and test your website. There's even a tool to estimate ROI for every second you save on loading time. If your site relies on direct sales or through a consumable experience such as ads or media, you want your end users to have the fastest experience possible. If your website is devoted to e-commerce, you are probably losing revenue if your site doesn't perform well on all mobile devices. Your customers could be abandoning their carts before completing their purchases. If you are paying for your traffic, you have now wasted advertising dollars on an abandoned cart. And to make matters worse, if a customer has a negative experience, they are unlikely to come back.
Now, before we start talking about our one-click recommendations to improve performance, I'd like to mention web.dev. Web.dev is an excellent resource to learn more about Core Web Vitals. For those of you with a web development background, there's documentation on how to write custom tests to measure not just Core Web Vitals, but also other metrics that are measured by PageSpeed Insights. In addition, there's also technical recommendations on how to improve your website's performance. We hope that by now everyone understands the importance of having a website with good performance. At the end of the day, a website is front and center for a business in the age of digital. Now that we've identified the problem, we would like to talk about some solutions. An easy and literally one-click solution to improve performance on a website across all devices is our secured web accelerator powered by Cloudflare. Now let's talk about other solutions that we don't necessarily recommend you try first. The most direct solution to improving a website's performance is straightforward. Optimize your website code. The problem with this solution is that it's also extremely expensive. You'll need a development team that has expertise in mobile web development, and experts are expensive. If you make changes to your website after the code has been optimized, you'll also need to have these experts complete the work in order to ensure your changes are optimized also. If you're using a content management system like WordPress, you'll lose a lot of the user friendliness that comes with these content management systems.
Another way to fix slow performance is by expanding your website to multiple data centers, which helps load balance the site. This isn't a practical solution since it is very costly to deploy and maintain.
And so our recommendation is to not have you reinvent the wheel and to use an existing content delivery network that provides optimizations and compression. We here at 101 Domain have partnered with Cloudflare to provide Secure Web Accelerator to you, our customers. Secure Web Accelerator is extremely economical, especially when compared to the heavy technical solutions we've discussed today. Secure Web Accelerator is powered by Cloudflare, and deploying SWA is really as simple as hitting the add button shown here on the right. We then handle the rest of the deployment for you. Once Secure Web Accelerator has been deployed, all you need to do is decide which optimizations you want to activate. In addition, the solutions and hosting teams at 101 Domain are available to provide direct support should you have any questions. Some of you may be asking yourselves right now, what is Cloudflare? Well, Cloudflare provides almost everything you need to make a website as fast as possible. All of that is wrapped up in one service. Cloudflare sits in front of your hosting provider and makes the internet work for you the way it works for the internet giants, without the need for huge engineering and development budgets or investments in technology hardware.
Think of the difference between a relay race and a 100-meter dash. Normally, users visiting your site are doing the sprint on their own, but with Cloudflare, they can instead pass the baton to an Olympic sprinter to get the job done much faster. Cloudflare is trusted by 17% of the Fortune 1000 companies to measure, track, and optimize site performance, helping to drive sales and SEO rankings. We also trust Cloudflare and use it to power 101domain.com. Let's go over how Cloudflare is able to make websites run faster. In this section, we'll discuss the basics of how Cloudflare's CDN works to cache, compress, and distribute websites to provide an improved user experience. We'll also touch on other features that make Cloudflare stand out from other traditional CDN providers, such as DNS performance and security features. No matter where your customers are, there is a Cloudflare data center nearby. With a content delivery network that spans more than 200 data center locations around the globe, your website's data is never far away from your customers. They are also continuously expanding by adding more data centers and increasing network bandwidth. So what happens when a visitor requests a site that uses Cloudflare? Instead of getting a full site from the hosting server, the device is served cached content from the nearest Cloudflare data center. Not only is the data cached, but it also is compressed. Any dynamic content that isn't cached is intelligently routed from the hosting server through Cloudflare's network. Cloudflare also provides a distributed DNS service from this data center network. The response times are some of the fastest available. Every DNS resolution request that gets routed to a Cloudflare data center gets a response almost instantaneously, with average response times in the 10 millisecond range. Not to mention the propagation speed of changes to DNS records are unmatched, with update times under 60 seconds. Now let's see how you can help get your site in line with the best practices of Google Core Web Vitals with Secure Web Accelerator powered by Cloudflare. I'll recap the terms and where Google wants you to be, and Ernesto will show you how to get there. We'll start with LCP, or largest contentful paint. This is how long it takes for the largest file to load and appear on the screen. Google wants this to take no longer than 2.5 seconds. First input delay, or FID, is an estimate of how fast it takes a button click to take effect. According to Google, a snappy website should have this take 100 milliseconds or less. CLS, or Cumulative Layout Shift, is all about how the website looks while it loads. The content should not move around much while it loads. And the score for this should be 0.1 or better.
Thanks for that refresher, Yev. Now let's take a look at some of the mechanisms which Cloudflare provides to improve web core vitals. We'll start with the optimization of images. One thing that we will see often is the reduction of the amount of data your website sends to your customers. The less data you send, the faster the transfer process will complete. Additionally, the receiving device will have to process less data, which can result in faster rendering times. By default, Secure Web Accelerator provides the global content delivery network, so images are sent from a data center closer to your customer. This again means a faster data transfer process. The two major optimizations that are available are called Polish and Mirage. Polish works by stripping unnecessary information from image files, compressing the files, and serving the files using the WebP codec. WebP was specifically designed for web transfer. The result is a much faster transfer when using WebP than when using other formats like JPEG. Mirage implements a feature for mobile devices called lazy loading. When a mobile device or a device on a slow connection requests your website, Mirage will send lower resolution images with the initial response. Once the website finishes loading, Mirage will then replace those low resolution images with higher quality images. Mirage reduces the initial size of the data transfer, and so your customers will feel like they're getting a faster website. Both Mirage and Polish work together. If your LCP is triggered by an image, activating both these optimizations will reduce the size of the file, shortening the transfer time. In addition, if your images are causing layout shift, the faster data transfer will decrease the rendering time, and that will reduce or eliminate the layout shift. The beauty of all this is that these features are activated by just toggling them on. There's nothing more you need to do. On the slide here, we have the switch for Polish, and that's just a drop-down menu. Secure Web Accelerator also offers other benefits when websites are proxied through the service. For example, we have Brotli compression. Brotli was specifically developed to compress web traffic. If you've ever worked with a zip file, Brotli is similar, but just specific for web traffic. For comparison, web traffic sent with Brotli compression reduces file size by 15 to 20% more than zip compression. Brotli compression really excels when you have large CSS files or if you have a lot of CSS files, and also if you're using SVGs. Let's also talk a little bit about HTTP 2 and HTTP 3 on the edge. The term edge refers to Cloudflare data centers, and so when a client requests a website from the edge, Cloudflare offers the browser an HTTP 2 connection by default. In addition, for browsers that support it, HTTP 3 is available. If Cloudflare does need to reach out to your web server, Cloudflare will use whatever connection protocols are available on your server. Just a note, HTTP 3 does have some advantages over HTTP 2, and most of those are related to performance. And just one more thing I do need to mention. For those of you that may still be using HTTP 1, it's important that you note that Page Speed Insights will penalize you for this. If you run a Page Speed Insights test, you'll see the recommendation to update to HTTP 2. If you do see that warning, we strongly recommend you activate Secure Web Accelerator. And the last optimization that I want to mention is called Rocket Loader. This optimization is specifically for JavaScript. So if you have a site that uses a carousel plugin, your site is using JavaScript in order to make that graphic appear. Rocket Loader can help reduce some of the first input delay that's caused by the JavaScript libraries that power some of these more advanced website features. And again, I really can't reiterate this enough. All of these enhancements, compressions, optimizations, they're all available by toggling switches on the dashboard. As a matter of fact, some of the optimizations are actually turned on by default. All you have to do is sign up and activate Secure Web Accelerator. And the last optimization that I want to talk about is called Railgun. Railgun is specifically designed for use cases where your website content may not be cacheable. This could include parts of your website that require sign-on with a username or a credential, or anything that is distinctive or unique to a certain visitor. Unfortunately, this is one of Secure Web Accelerator's features that does require an installation. Once deployed, Railgun can then detect what specific parts of your website are changing. Once the dynamic sections of your website are identified, only those sections need to be sent out for every request. The static portions are then cached on the content delivery network. This can then significantly reduce the amount of bandwidth required for every request by more than 90% in some cases. Since this is an advanced feature, we do recommend that you reach out to us for a consultation if you're interested in enabling Railgun for Secure Web Accelerator. Now that we have discussed all of the features, let's talk about our Secure Web Accelerator plans. All SWA plans come with access to distributed DNS and the static content caching on the CDN. Secure Web Accelerator Plus includes Broadly compression, network optimizations, Rocket Loader, and image compression and optimizations. If you're using WordPress, you will also have access to a feature called Automatic Platform Optimization. This feature is activated through a plugin and helps Secure Web Accelerator identify cacheable resources while at the same time optimizing SWA options for your specific site. Lastly, Secure Web Accelerator Professional offers everything SWA Plus offers with the addition of Railgun. There are also other features not related to site performance, such as advanced analytics, custom SSL certificate uploads, and custom name servers. We recommend that you activate Secure Web Accelerator Plus at a minimum. With SWA Plus, you will gain almost all of the optimizations that improve Web Core Vitals. As you can see from the table below, all metrics improve as you move from not using SWA to SWA Basic, and then to SWA Plus and Pro. We're sharing the URLs for the test sites in the chat right now. So feel free to compare the performance on your mobile devices or run a page speed insights test.
Thanks, Ernesto. All right, we've gone over a lot about the speed benefits of Secure Web Accelerator, but that's not all it has to offer. Check out our previous webinar where we went over all of the security features that come included with the product. We went over the powerful firewall and the many ways Cloudflare helps protect your site from attacks. If you'd like to learn more about where your website performance and security stands, or have more questions, you're encouraged to request a free and confidential security scan. We prepare a detailed report and have a no-obligation consultation about the findings. If you're interested, give us a call or email corporate@101domain.com.
Before we move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. We hope we provided insight and possibly some guidance on how to manage this upcoming change to Google search. I'd also like to thank Yev and True for joining me. If you have any questions for either me, Yev, or True, feel free to post them in the chat box and we'll go ahead and start answering them now.
Thanks, Ernesto. One more reminder before we continue to the questions is all of this is being recorded and the recording will be available after the webinar. So if you missed anything or had more questions and want to revisit the webinar, you will get a recording.
All right. So it looks like we have some great questions already. Let's take a look here. So Google PageSpeed tests, we consistently score in the 90s for both mobile and desktop. However, we never passed the 28-day test. Again, I believe True mentioned the difference between the 28-day test and the actual lab test. True, do you want to highlight some points there?
Yeah, way to start out with the most, advanced question there. That's great. Yeah, so I would say here's what's going on. So you mentioned that CLS and LCP are your two issues. So a couple observations. So one is I've actually seen the field data not perfectly align with the lab data even after a 28-day period. That's often due to the fact, and you're going to have to confirm this your own, that often these website visitors are from third world countries, and the lab data tool that is crawling your site to test its speed is actually a faster device. And so the definition of passing is actually if 75% of your users fall within the score that Google deems good. So for CLS, it needs to be under 0.1 seconds. And for LCP, it will need to be under 2.5 seconds. So 75% of your real users will need to pass. And so if you're passing according to the lab data, it in part might be because you have a lot of people with slow internet connections visiting your site. The solution that Ernesto and Yev were highlighting, Cloudflare, if you don't already have that enabled, you absolutely should. And what we found in addition to that is sometimes different components of the site are still loading not through a CDN, a content delivery network. So your website can get cached all over the globe and serve those, those countries that are really far away from your server through like a cached version of it. But still, JavaScript will actually call images that might be hosted elsewhere, which can create a really big lag called latency. So you want to make sure that all elements of your website are being loaded close to where your users are searching from, which is just a setting that you need to configure within Cloudflare. So we've seen that happen with clients where they're passing in the lab data, but they're not passing in the field data. And Ernesto, I think you mentioned in the chat here that you had maybe your 2 cents to add to that as well.
Yeah, and True, I have to agree with that assessment about the excessive JavaScript on this particular in this particular situation. It really feels like accelerating the delivery of that payload is going to be beneficial, and that could potentially drop a lot of the other metrics that are causing that sporadic lower page speed score. For those lower end devices, you'll see those performance improvements. Let's see. We got another great question here. So, how long does Cloudflare take before I can see improvements in page speed insights? I'll go ahead and answer that. So the answer to that is somewhere in between 60 seconds and 5 minutes. Really, the lab data is what you'll see the immediate improvement on. The 28-day data, of course, that's going to take time as users visit your site and the data gets collected. But the changes take effect almost immediately. So within 5 minutes after you activate Secure Web Accelerator, you can run another page speed test, and you should see an immediate increase in score. A lot of the metrics for Core Web Vitals will actually improve just by changing the DNS to Cloudflare. And as the optimizations get activated, you'll see continued improvements. So once you activate all the optimizations you want to activate it, you've taken that activation as far as it can go.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we have another question. It says, my website is mobile friendly, but my Core Web Vital score is low on mobile. What can I do? Well, a lot of things about websites being mobile friendly is just traditionally geared towards, is it designed to be responsive and show the screen layout that is mobile friendly, but it doesn't necessarily take into account all of the server optimizations and the way that the website loads. So Core Web Vitals is mostly geared toward that. And again, the Secure Web Accelerator Plus will take care of a lot of the changes automatically by improving all of these scores here for that. Okay. One more question was, can scores differ between mobile and desktop? And that is very true. When you're looking at the page speed insights scores, there is a toggle between desktop and mobile, and you'll see that desktop scores are always much higher. But the thing to know is Google is really hyper-focusing on mobile performance. So all of these changes to their search algorithm and the way that your page would rank in those search results is geared towards the scores that you have on mobile.
All right. So we've got an easy one here. So when will this update roll out? So originally this update was scheduled to begin rolling out this month, but Google provided another update, and the initial rollout will begin to take place in June and will continue through the end of the summer. So Google, usually whenever they do a rollout of this magnitude, they will turn some things on, they'll see the result, and then they'll continue to push forward with the change. Yeah, so by the end of the summer, this change will have taken full effect, and you should start to see the changes in your Google console accounts. So let's see. Oh, we have a bit of a development question. Do websites created using Angular that have no loading time but have multiple URLs on separate pages cause any problems? If you were talking about Secure Web Accelerator and Cloudflare, no. As a matter of fact, websites that are developed with Angular and React, those types of specific libraries, are actually better off in this case because the JavaScript payloads that are sent arrive at the devices much faster. And really, that's the main thrust that you'll get from Secure Web Accelerator in your case. The JavaScript payloads will come from a data center instead of coming from a Cloudflare data center instead of coming straight from your origin server. So you'll reduce a lot of the time to first byte, and you know, if you have uh, image requests embedded inside of that Angular request, I'm sorry, inside of the Angular web page, those will actually get accelerated also, just as a consequence of everything being delivered faster.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we have another question that says, I already use the free DNS interface from Cloudflare coupled with a caching extension. Are this free version enough, or does Cloudflare Pro offer more? Is it even compatible? So one thing that this kind of pivots into is the lower tier version of Cloudflare doesn't offer as much. And while you can use caching plugins and extensions, the benefits from Secure Web Accelerator Plus provide a lot more than just the basic version. And it should be compatible with third-party caching plugins. But this kind of leads into another question about WordPress. So that if you do have WordPress, there is one more thing that can really accelerate all of this, and it's called automatic platform optimization. So there's a similar question here. I have a WordPress site and my score is showing a fail in PageSpeed Insights. What can I do? So if you're looking at the Plus or the Pro version of Secure Web Accelerator, both of those have the automatic platform optimization as an option. And that is an amazing plugin that you can install onto WordPress. And it does have one extra step where within your Cloudflare account, you generate a API key, and then you copy that into the WordPress plugin area, and then that activates the platform optimization. And that is a very, very powerful plugin that takes most of the processing that WordPress expects to do and most of the static content that WordPress has, and improves all of that. And we've seen the scores on all of these metrics for Google Core Web Vitals get improved even further.
Let's see. Another easy one. Is Cloudflare GDPR compliant? Yes, absolutely. Let's.
Yeah, Cloudflare doesn't do anything with the data itself. It just moves it along. If your website content has to be GDPR compliant, there are some plugins and similar extensions for WordPress if you're using that as a platform.
Yeah, just to add on to what you have mentioned. So remember, Cloudflare essentially just sits in front of your hosting service. So nothing that is cached on the content delivery network it should be related to GDPR.
Right.
Let's see.
Hey Ernesto, there was a different component to that first question that we never answered. Would it be okay if I revisited that?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So there was a second question there. It says sometimes when we run the page speed test, it gives an abnormally low score the first time, but then we click analyze a second time and the score jumps. Is this a concern? So that's actually pretty common. For some reason, whenever I run my tests as well on page speed insights, the first one typically is lower and then the second one is higher. I would evaluate it and probably say that the first instance is the true value. And that's because I have a feeling that when you run it a second time, Google is accidentally caching some of the elements on its page, even though it says that it clears the cache. I have a feeling it's not, because of that phenomenon of the score being higher a second time. So it's not a concern as much as, just almost ignore the second and third time that you evaluate a page and go off of that first one. And then just one more note I wanted to add, because you mentioned that the 28-day collection period is failing for the aggregate experience. It's a little confusing, but Google rolls out an aggregate value of your entire website. So even when you're evaluating an individual page, Google is pass or failing you in part over, for your overall domain. And that data is available online as well for you to see, how your aggregate origin summary is doing. I couldn't rattle off the URL to you to go and look that up, but if you research how to see your overall domain origin summary, you can see that as well, in addition to the Page Insights tool that is going to evaluate only one URL.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Drew. So I did want to add one more thing to that. Something else that I have seen whenever there's a variance is third parties. So if you have any libraries like chat or any features like that that are being provided by third parties, sometimes that variance can come from their the fact that their service is not optimized as well. So yeah, so again, something to do with the caching maybe, but yeah, that's something that happens that I've seen also. So let's see. Hmm.
How about the question, Ernesto? I already used the free DNS interface from Cloudflare coupled with the caching extension from nitropack.io. Are these enough, or does Cloudflare Pro offer more? Is it even compatible with nitropack.io?
Let me see. A couple with caching. So well, I'm not as familiar with nitropack.io as other people are, but what I can say about some of these hosted optimizations is that the way that Cloudflare caches content is it specifically looks for content that doesn't change. If you're caching content uh, uh, using a local caching plugin like this or extension like this, the chances are that you're upgrading to a SWA Pro or SWA Plus is going to be beneficial if you have other types of assets on the site. So just to give you an example, you're caching HTML or CSS, but you still have to request images, right? From every time somebody visits your site. And so really the optimizations that are built in the Cloudflare would be beneficial. As far as it being compatible with nitropack.io, I don't necessarily believe there should be any conflict simply because Cloudflare will just take whatever you provide. If it renders on a browser, it should work through Cloudflare. But if you have any questions about that, you can always attempt to activate SWA, and we can, if there are any issues, feel free to open up a support ticket, and we'll be glad to provide assistance in working out what needs to be done to get it functional. So.
Okay, we have another recent question. How long before Cloudflare recrawls the website for new content to cache?
what happens when you update or add new content? That's a great question. It does take time, and it varies as to how often it starts caching new content that is static. The important thing to note is that if you have Secure Web Accelerator through 101 domain, you have an easy button to click right within your account to hit clear cache, and that'll make it immediately dump and recrawl for any new changes and start caching the process all over again. And there's also, if you really want to make a lot of big changes, if you are logged into the Cloudflare panel, you could enable something called developer mode, which temporarily disables all of caching. Okay, already getting there. I did want to mention some of the things that we posted here in the chat, some of the resources and links. A lot of this will be available to you guys in our white paper as well. The Page Speed Insights tool is linked first, then the tool that measures your revenue lost or gained by improving your website scores. More info about the Web Vitals is linked after that. And our previous webinar discussing our security improvements found with Secure Web Accelerator is linked after that. That one was a fun one. There's a lot of things that Cloudflare does, not only for making your website faster and optimized for core web vitals, but also more secure, capable of handling DDoS attacks and automatically blocking a lot of threats with their web access firewall. Ernesto, you have a few sample domains listed off there. Did you want to mention something about those?
Yeah, actually, thanks for mentioning that. So we put together some a very simple and straight. Well, it's actually really bad intentionally WordPress site, so that you can compare just the improvements that occur as you move from not having a content delivery network like SWA to SWA Basic, and then upgrading to SWA Plus or Professional. Feel free to go ahead and click those links or run page speed scans on those links, and you can actually go over some of those metrics. But as we mentioned during the presentation, you can see just a nice consistent upward movement on the page speed score as you move up, and you'll see the core web vitals also move up as you move up in SWA plan. Let's see. I think that's all the questions we have.
Ernesto, can I ask one to myself and then answer it, because I think the audience would find it valuable? The
Sure.
question to myself would be, hey, so if we pass core web vitals, like what sort of boost in traffic, maybe, as a percentage? I don't know if anyone's wondering that, but I have like a decent answer from seeing a few websites, implement Cloudflare and pass core web vitals. We've seen like dramatic increases, and you can't make any promises because Google is Google. However, I've seen sites more than double as a result of getting their site speeds up and actually passing core web vitals. So it is a high bar. I don't know if you could tell, even in the frustration of that one question of we're in the 90s and we're still not passing it. That's very common. You're going to do a lot to improve your website speeds, and you will see an uptick in traffic. But that's going to be more so just because you've improved your page experience overall. The core web vitals assessment is pass or fail, and the new component of the algorithm that Google is introducing is the core web vitals assessment specifically. So because that hasn't been rolled out, I don't know how much of a lift you'll see as a result of passing core web vitals, but I can tell you by simply improving your website speeds dramatically by utilizing Cloudflare, getting some really heavy plugins off of your site. A lot of plugins put a bunch of junk code that has to load and blocks a lot of other important components on your pages. So there's almost like an entire art and science behind, improving your page speeds in addition to Cloudflare, which is an immediate point and click, just button click lift, if you will. But I just wanted to mention that you'll see a pretty dramatic increase in website traffic by improving your website speed. So I would definitely say if your site is a revenue generator for your business, it's definitely worth investing in terms of the traffic, the uptick in traffic that you receive.
Yeah, and I think, Drew, I've seen this happen also. The quality of the traffic that arrives, the conversion rates, they do tend to go up, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the tool that Yev was pointing out. So Google created that tool where you can literally plug in, this is how many visits to my site I get. Here's our conversion rate, like as a percentage of the users that visit. This is the percent that buys something or signs up through my form fill. And then here's what a form fill or a purchase is worth, so the conversion value. And you plug in those metrics and then let Google analyze your current site speed. And it will say, by improving your site speed by 1 second, you'll experience this uptick in revenue. By improving your site speeds by another second, you'll see this uptick in revenue. So I really recommend checking out that Think with Google tool that you have highlighted, because you'll see the actual dollar value of what improving your website speed will be worth, strictly from a conversion rate improvement point of view, not even including or incorporating the uptick in traffic that you'll receive. You'll also experience a higher conversion rate by improving your site speeds.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've definitely seen that, and yeah, double doesn't surprise me. I've personally seen higher, so
Yeah, I have as well.
yeah. All right, well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any more questions, or if you'd like to see your the report that we can provide on your property, feel free to reach out to us. Once again, that email address is corporate@101domain.com. Once again, thank you all for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.